Ronald D. Laing, the writer of this book, The Facts of Life from 1976, was a psychiatrist, a doctor, a teacher, a psychoanalyst, and a lot more. He would in his time break and criticize both intellectual and practical with conventional psychiatric methods and institutions. The reason for it was, in a direct way, this that people with their settled diagnosis not only should be seen as biologically symptoms, problems, but also the individuals express feelings as social and personal experiences. Psychiatric hospitalization might therefore only make it worse for the individual patient. My interpretation of this work has not been done in a whole overview of a total thought over it all. Only that there might not be one, because his facts of life is going to be in development until he dies, and because of the end, in a more literal sense, where he says, or rather put in a statement from Saint Catherine of Siena, that all the way to heaven is heaven because Jesus said, I am the way. I don't want to put my own interpretation on this saying from Saint Catherine and Ronald for using it here in this work, but maybe the reason could be, in a truly direct way and understanding, that the only internal truth there is internal change. Therefore, it's not about the end goal of the journey, but the journey itself, of all your experiences, both good and bad ones. Therefore, there is no overall total thought behind this work, besides this one, that there is none. Another great work with a journey like this could be The Alchemist, a couple of years later in 1988. I found this work in an antique store, and if you take a look at it, it's not that appealing. It looks very boring, even though I like the color blue. But whenever there is a book about our journey as individuals, our experiences and existential questions about life and death, I'm always going to be interested in that. I guess no matter who is providing this honest answer to these troubling questions, even better and more interesting when a psychiatrist of his high caliber does. If we take a look at the very start of this work, there is a quote from Euripides, a Greek tragedian of classical Athens, and it goes like this in a more direct way. Who knows if life isn't death and death is life? Therefore, he's definitely an existentialist, and because of this work, might always has been one, even when he was young and wasn't directly aware of it. Because what is philosophy of for the classical Athens philosophers, mostly for Socrates and Plato, a practice of dying, to understand the internal ideas in a modern way, not what is beautiful here and then from time to time, but what is beauty in itself as an internal idea, a concept, maybe. And then we have Heidegger from the 20th century that actually died the same year this book was published. He tried to understand the being's meaning and to understand humans' engagement with the world. And about that he said this in a truly direct manner, that because of our understanding of death, we urges to live, and and when you're a kid and when you're young, you probably don't think too much about dying, but you definitely do when you get older. So death is the understanding that you're going to die is a possibility for you to live while life is here for you. And sadly, most people is trying to avoid this understanding of death. Instead, they want to be entertained, they want to be distracted, to forget, and just to do whatever other people are doing, as in forgetting, to forget, in actually by doing nothing. Heidegger, with intense inspiration from Mr. Kierkegaard, maybe in trying to move away from Mr. Kierkegaard or trying to think further than him, not away in moving on, but in adding more to it. Saying that you can make a distinction between the world from the subject of oneself, because the world is in many ways a part of it, and so on. But in doing so, you need a high amount of patience and a great overview in this dialectical build-up, which I think he doesn't have at all. I mean, what is the meaning behind Mr. Kierkegaard saying that the moment of death is Christianity's situation, and what is he saying about death? Let's go back to the title before we move on, which is The Facts of Life. And how should we make an interpretation of this? Is it facts of life in an already settled decision agreement, as that is how it's always gonna be? But the only settled agreement that we have is that what is absolute is only this, that everything is going to change, eternal change. But that's only one fact, but is facts in plural. Meaning what exactly? Maybe all of his existence different readings in every matter, and so sadly a problem occurs. if you're not honest to the very moment of these facts of life and death as experiences for the individual, in this case Ronald, because if you're not honest to this exact moment in time, you think for a system and makes the truth a concept for everyone and everything. As Kierkegaard would say, you can't comprehend a single human, but only the concept of human. So is this going on here? Ronald's own experiences as facts of life? Perhaps a paradox maybe, but I think he's pretty honest in its exact moment in this work. After the title and after the quote, he mentions also in the beginning of this work, love. Love as a necessity of meaning, which might be the first concept of facts of life in this work, because who would not include love in their way of existing? I mean, how would life be without it? If you read a little further, he might draw a connection between the lack of love and people that have fallen really far away from the hands of God, and he's definitely not holding back with truly provocative and outgoing rhetorical language in saying this. As a conclusion of that, these people is missing a cleansing of natural selection supported by behavioral technology and genetic control. So love could be a fact of life, but he makes a contradiction. In studying human biology, science of human life, there might only be very little presence of this love, and might connect this with the people that fall far away from the hands of God. But what would Konrad Lorenz say to this in his work on aggression, so-called evil, from 1963? Could there be similarities in animal biology and humans? And has love something to do with good and evil? And what would he say about natural selection? Did Ronald read this work? And so on. And this natural selection might just happen naturally. This is where we are heading. So did Ronald read this work and so on, which might also come to show in this work. Heading. Now let's talk a little about his little preface, where another journey of life occurs, from a poem called Song of the Rider by Federico Garcia Lorca, that even though he knows all the roadways, he will never get to Cordoba. Life's journey with unattainable goals towards death, because death is waiting for you before you get there. And what a cruelty if you understand what is good for you, but can make it into real life, and even more cruel to make what is good for you only something for you to come when you're dead. So maybe he, the horseman, should change his direction on where he's going. And the poem ends like this: Cordoba, far away and lonely, because no one is really there, or because having these unattainable goals takes you far away from real life, or maybe both altogether. And I think a little of Nietzsche when I'm reading this poem. If you have not seen my second book review of Mr. Kierkegaard and quotes, I would definitely recommend that, because I talk about a narrator in context to Mr. Kierkegaard. Here the narrator can be seen in a little different view, narrator as the overall idea behind it all, which I think we now have found, the journey of life that is not absolute, with might at least one fact of life, love, as for guidance in doing so. In context to Mr. Kierkegaard being a genius, having God as the overall idea, help keeping him on the right roadway, because if you're a genius, you can't stop thinking and you can't stop asking questions, and therefore without God as an overall idea, he might end up talking about something that is out of context, he's gonna mess up with his dialectical build-up, and not talking about what he intended to say in the first place. In the beginning of this video I said that he would break and criticize both intellectual and practical with conventional psychiatric methods and institutions, and I have found writings in this work that can tell us more about that. First, let's talk about it intellectual, and this example is from almost in the middle of the book, of the treatment and examination of a 14-year-old girl with schizophrenia. The family thinks that something is wrong with her for being untraditionally, according to the family and other people. How so? She wouldn't eat and looked too skinny, but her family members was highly obese. She would stare into a wall and wouldn't watch television with her family, but her family would scream and shout of each other, which she didn't like, and so on. And he comes with many more examples of this in his book, where he breaks intellectual with his time's sacred methods and institutions. In this example, I think it's very clear in a modern way now, when you look back at it, what is going on. Back then you might think something is biologically wrong with her, but now all that is wrong with her is her being from a dysfunctional family. And this is her way of showing it, because she's a 14-year-old girl. And if you were if you were older, it would be more easy to deal with it, because if you were from a dysfunctional family, you might say, okay, I don't want to have contact with them, therefore I move away, and so on. And if I don't want to get obese, I understand what to eat, and work out, and so on to prevent that from happening. But she's a 14-year-old girl, so she definitely don't know how to say it. She don't know how to act on it, and therefore this is her way of showing it, that she's from a dysfunctional family. And definitely this could in the future bring up these mentally disorders. It definitely could, but in the first place here, there's nothing wrong with her. At least I would say, and I think this is the meaning that he wanted to provide. Nothing is wrong with her. Something is wrong with her environment, her social experiences, and her dysfunctional family. The reason why she don't want to eat is because she don't want to get obese. And this is her way of showing it, that she don't agree with her parents, and she don't like them for being obese. And she can't tell it, maybe directly, or maybe because she's young. There's no other way she think of showing it other than from stop eating. It's like kids when they cry. They can't say, Daddy, I don't like you, you're an idiot. So instead they cry. This is their way of showing it. And their family is, it does not say aggressive, but I mean, if you scream and shout at each other almost every day, I can imagine her not be wanting to be a part of that, and therefore she stares into a wall. And also that of a way of showing that, okay, I do not want to be a part of this, but I am not fully developed enough to actually go and do something about it, other than to stare into a wall, which is definitely what you say in a modern way now, a cry of help. So she makes a cry for help, and I think the overall meaning that Ronald is trying to provide here, and also why there's an anti-psychiatrist movement after this, which you don't want to be a part of, at least of what I know of. But definitely this is a way of saying this, okay, she is crying for help, and the way you want to help her is bringing her in, examine her over and over again, heavy medicate her, and so on, which is definitely only gonna make it worse, because what she needs is to deal with the primary reasons that are the family, her dysfunctional family, and not the secondary meaning, which is her response to a dysfunctional family. And this is how you treat people with mentally disorders today in a more modern way, at least for what I know of. I can't really go into too many details of this because I simply don't know. But I just want to say and to make a reference to this, because if you go even more back in time, people would actually be really cruel, even more cruel to people with mentally disorders. And you could ask, okay, why would they do that? And if you make a reference to the classical Greek philosophers, how would they look on evil? They would say, why are people evil to each other? And they would say, because people are stupid. And in some ways I agree, because if there's something that makes people go crazy is when they don't understand. So if they're dealing with something they don't understand, they become really cruel, really weird, and really hateful and evil to things, to other people, when they don't understand. And back in the days, if you go even further back in time, they would almost treat people with mental disorders like criminals, even worse than criminals, even torturing them, simply because of their ignorance. And I also wanted to bring this up because I talked a little about this in my first book review with Mr. Kierkegaard and Philosophical Fragments, where you need to let go of your rational mind. And even Ronald is also bringing this up, that even though, maybe he's not saying this directly, but even though there is a scientific proof of that and so on, sometimes there should be a common sense of your compassion and love to other people, of what not to do and what to do. And when I say today in a more modern way, this treatment, I definitely mean that I don't think this has moved away a lot from when this book was written, and I don't know if the anti-psychiatrist movement have had any influence on it. I guess there's more importance and focus now on the social experiences and environment. That could be the primary factor for this mentally disorder to develop. But I don't necessarily think that this is the case still today, and there's definitely still a good amount of ignorance is this in this field of thinking. And I can definitely understand that in some cases is definitely a necessity to heavily medicate people, because they're not in control over themselves, and therefore they can be not only a danger for themselves but also other people. And of course, in Mr. Kierkegaard's matter, there is no proof of God existence, because you can prove that, and therefore you need faith to take this leap and jump in faith for you to leave your rational mind behind that can't seem to understand it. But in this case, as Ronald would say, there could be scientific proof. The papers could be right, and with the doctors with the high education, their qualifications, and so on, it would sound reasonable. And you say, you know what, because of the papers, all right then. But there should always be one person that would take a look at it, and even so, it might seem reasonable. They should say it's still pretty stupid because of lack of love. Let's now look at this love and compassion and the individual's expressed feelings as social and personal experiences, and how this came into practical matters. Near the end of this work, he speaks of how, through a report written by him, changed the relationship between the nurses and their patients, because human chemistry is truly important, and of course love and compassion as well. So in the women's section, 12 of the most hopeless patients after 18 months, all of them had left the hospital, but sadly they all returned back. But still the environment seemed to have changed a little, and people working there started to look in other places for answers. And this is truly a great example of what people need when they fade away. They definitely don't need to get locked up because it's only gonna make it worse for them. They need to get out there every day. They need to talk to other people, social interaction, love and compassion for the people. They need sunlight, they need to move their body, and so on. And this is a great example of that. And sadly, when they got out into the real world again, they came back, maybe because this love and affection was not provided for them out there in the real world. So sadly now the video has come to an end. There's definitely a lot more to say, but I think at least for now I said everything that I wanted to say, and I can truly recommend this book. At first it was not really that appealing for me when I found it, but what is written in it, and for Ronald to be such an honest man in this work, and if you look into more of his practical and intellectual influence on this matter, it's really something really inspirational, and definitely something everyone should read. So a great work, and I'm happy that I read it.